Terry, Reverend Terry Whitmire, one of the elders here. And I'm glad we're all here together this morning. Aren't you guys? I am. It's, welcoming all the new members. And just kind of reminds me, that God has called us to be here together as a family and as His family. And that's such a gift. So I'm thankful. This morning, we are continuing in our exploration of the book of Job, a sermon series called Broken Images of God. And today we're going to talk about God in the midst of the why. Job asks a lot of questions. And that's fairly warranted, considering his story and his background. And so, let's just do a little recap on the book of Job, on everything that's happened so far. Let's do it together. I want your help. So, tell me what happened in the story. Job is accused. Everybody died. Everyone Job loved died, except his wife, who nags him. So what else happened? His friends were cool, and then they were not cool. They sat with him and grieved, and then they started talking. And that was when they were not cool anymore. Yeah, he lost all his possessions. He wrestled with God. And he lamented. Yes. Yeah. The story tells us that Job was truly a good person. A righteous man, blameless. He was a true servant of God. And then all of these things happen. He was wealthy and he had lots of children, lots of servants, lots of animals. But, and then he suddenly lost everything. To his perspective, it was for no reason. He just lost everything except his wife, who nagged him. He was suddenly stricken with a disease that made everything hurt physically. And his wife told him to just curse God and die. His 3 friends came and told him he must have sinned since all this happened. And finally, I think where we are now in the story, Job doesn't know what's going on. He's all this stuff has happened. And he is just confused. He's like, well, I don't know what's happening. See, Job operated in a religious culture that told him that if he did good, he would be blessed. And so far in his life, it looked like that was happening. It looked like if you do all the right things, then everything will work out according to script. Has anybody else ever thought that? I have. For some reason, whether it was actually said to me or not, I thought that at one time in my life before anything bad happened. But Job knew in his story, and we know from this story, that he didn't do anything wrong. So understandably, Job is now standing at a crossroads of an existential crisis. The way he thought the world worked is not how it's working. Everything is turned upside down, according to his ideology. Have you ever been at that crossroads? I've been there. Where suddenly the way we thought the world worked isn't what's happening. I think we all come to that place several momentous times in our lives. It's a powerful place, I believe it's at those crossroads where, when we are each given a choice, we can push away all the inconsistencies and continue to doggedly maintain our previously held worldview. Or we can allow God to bring us into a new mindset, a new understanding of the world, a new understanding of God's self. We can allow ourselves to evolve and grow. But it's not a comfortable place to be. It's a very painful place, usually. Many times, it is great loss and great suffering that brings us to this crossroads, just as it is for Job in this story. The very nature of the world not working as we thought it did shakes the foundations of our understanding of reality. And that is very scary and very disorienting. It's a very volatile place. And when we look for God in the midst of that earthquake, it's sometimes hard to find him because everything is upended. Everything looks different to our eyes, so different from what we expected based on our old worldview. So what do we do in those times? That's my question for us this morning. We're all going to find ourselves there, much as we try to avoid it. How do we navigate these quakes in our lives? I would just want us to leave that question in our minds as we look at Job's description of the place that he's at. Because as we look at this text, I think Job is standing right in the middle of this crossroad, surrounded by the wreckage of his life, and layer on top of that, the wreckage of his understanding of how God works and how the world works. So in chapter 23, Job says, "Even today my complaint is bitter. There is a heavy hand on me as I groan. If I only knew where to find God, if only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say to me. Would he vigorously oppose me? No, he would not press charges against me. There the upright can establish their innocence, and there I would be delivered forever from my judge." Do you hear him crying out? He's like, I just have to talk to God, right? So listen to this now. Job is going to describe not being able to find God as he wrestles with his devastation. He says, "But if I go to the east, he's not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him, and when he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him." But then Job tells us the crux of his faith that he holds on to even as everything else gets blown to pieces. He says, "But God knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept to his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread." That's a painful place to be. In short, I hear Job saying, this isn't fair. Let me talk to God and argue my case that this isn't fair, but I can't find him anywhere. But I have to hold on to my belief that I've walked uprightly, I haven't sinned, and God knows that. And then, on top of that, in chapter 24, Job tells us about his realizations that not only is his life not working the way he thought it would, not only is God not happening the way he thought it would. Also, then he looks outside himself at the rest of the world. And in chapter 24, he says, I just want you to listen. This is some of the Message paraphrase of what chapter 24 says. See if you can't identify with what he says here. He says, but if judgment day isn't hidden from the Almighty, then why are we kept in the dark? There are people out there getting by with murder, stealing and lying and cheating. They rip off the poor and exploit the unfortunate, push the helpless into the ditch, bully the weak so that they fear for their lives. The poor have to scavenge for food in back alleys. They sort through the garbage of the rich, eke out survival on handouts. Homeless, they shiver through cold nights on the streets. They've no place to lay their heads. Exposed to the weather, wet and frozen, they huddle in makeshift shelters. They go about patched and threadbare. Even the hard workers go hungry. No matter how backbreaking their labor, they can never make ends meet. People are dying left and right, groaning in torment. The wretched cry out for help, and God does nothing, acts like nothing's wrong. Wow. That's heavy, but it's really relatable. Isn't this all of the why that we ask God? How can it be that all of this injustice just goes on in the world? Like, why don't you shut this down, God? Like, how is this an okay way for the world to operate? It's not right. Right? That's the cry of our hearts when we look out. Sometimes when we look in. The fact that there is horrible injustice in the world, people being ground underfoot by others, huge inequities between the weak and the powerful, that very fact is an axe to the root of the good for good, bad for bad tree. When our eyes become open to injustice and our hearts break because of it, we have to come face to face to the fact that very little in the world is fair. It's just not. Not only our personal suffering, but the suffering of the world. None of it is fair or just or warranted, and yet it happens. And yet, when we face suffering in our own lives, somehow our default is to ask why. Why me? I think it's something about who we are as humans. We always look for meaning, especially when things go wrong. Why is this happening? Like, what does it mean? Is there a reason for this? I just have to say that I think it's really heavy to talk about all of this, because I do not believe that it's how the world was originally created to be. All of the devastating injustice that we see around us is a result of humanity pulling away from God's love. And God never wanted that for us, and never wanted that for the world. And that's why God always stands saying, come back to me, come closer to me. And the Bible contains beautiful promises that Jesus will make everything new and will set everything right. And those who are ground underfoot will one day be exalted to the top. And that's the hope that we hold in God's redemption of this world. Sometimes we can look and see some actions that we've taken that have resulted in unpleasant consequences for us. Or sometimes we can see how someone else's actions have directly impacted us. But often when tragedy happens, it's not in any way our fault. And sometimes we don't even find someone else to blame. Even if we do see someone else out there who did something to us, it's not satisfying or helpful to us to blame them. Holding a grudge will not free us from our pain or help us to grow. We know this, and yet it's really hard to let go sometimes. Jesus, help us. But so, when we stand at the crossroads of tragedy, pain, loss, suffering, when our worlds are upside down and nothing makes sense, good Lord, what can we do? The only path to peace is going to be to find God's presence there in that place. How do we find God in the earthquake? We have to look at Jesus. Jesus, who is the true image of God's heart toward us and of God's actions toward us. Think about it this way. Perhaps a broken image of God that Job is seeing in this moment in his life is this. God seems far away, unfindable, unmoved by Job's pleadings. There is injustice everywhere Job looks, and God doesn't seem to care about punishing the wrongdoers or rescuing the ones who are wronged. I can relate to that. But I believe that those are broken images of God. Because the image that Jesus shows us contrasts with what Job is seeing. In Jesus, we see God coming into our world and literally shouldering our pain, suffering injustice as he allows his own death on the cross. He joins us in our human experience rather than being far away. He showed love and gave healing and encouragement to every person he met who was stooped low, who was downtrodden, hurting. Jesus shows us that we are never far away from God's presence. We have to remember that the writer of Job didn't have the benefit of seeing Jesus. This was written at least several hundred years before Jesus was born on this earth. So the writer didn't have the benefit of seeing Jesus, the truest picture of God's love and presence with all of creation. But we do have that benefit. And in Jesus, God's answer to every one of our questions is, I love you. We ask, why is this happening? And maybe God says, I don't have an answer for that, but I love you and I'm with you. I'll sacrifice myself in order to let you know how much I'm with you. How much I will never turn away from you. I can never get away from the image of Jesus. Like, brutally attached to a cross, saying to God, his Father, about the people who put him there, forgive them. They don't know what they were doing. Like, that's Jesus not even turning away in that moment from the very hatred that put him there, but responding to it in love. God is with us at those crossroads that we dread, and that we try to avoid as hard as we can. God cannot not be with us. He has pledged himself to us forever. Remember how Jesus said, "I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I am with you always, even to the end of time." God says to us in the words of the prophet Isaiah, "Can a mother forget the child at her breast? Even if she ever does, I will not forget you. You are carved into my hand. You are in my heart forever." Sometimes our why questions, which are perfectly normal and human, there's nothing wrong with them. I think sometimes our furious questioning deafens our ears to hearing God saying to us, "I'm right here with you. I love you. I'm not far away." May we not let our hearts grow hard toward God when we don't find an answer to our why questions. Even when our world is upside down and meaning is hard to find, may we choose to believe in God's fearless love for us, no matter what is happening in our lives. God, help us to fearlessly find your love, even when there are no answers. God is right here with us, Emmanuel. And God is loving us while we're asking why. And he's experiencing our pain as if it were his own, because it is his own, because he's that close with us. The poet E.E. Cummings wrote a beautiful poem that I find expresses how much God is with us and we are with God, no matter how we feel. And so I want us to settle in right now and hear this poem with us as God's dearly loved children in the role of the speaker, and God as the one that we're speaking about. So if it helps you to listen, just close your eyes right now. And let's try to take in how close God is to us at all times. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, true. And it's you are whatever the moon has always meant. And whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than the soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. And on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread and he gave thanks. And he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this to remember me. And in the same way, after supper, he took the cup. And he said, "This cup is a new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it to remember me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." I want to ask the servers to come up and stand with me now. We proclaim the Lord's death until he comes, that Jesus entered in to and didn't shy away from the pain and the suffering that is in this world, but he shouldered it on our behalf so that we would know that he is always with us. So as you come to take part in this table of communion, remember him. He is with you. He is with us. He will never be apart from us, for we are in his heart and he is in ours. He invited us into communion with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He invited us to come and be one with them. So as you take the bread and the juice today, let it be a step into that communion, knowing that God has already taken all of the other steps in order to be with us. So when you're ready, come up on the inside aisles and then go back on the outside aisles. And I want to ask that after you participate in communion, just stick around for a few minutes because we have something special we want to share with everybody before we leave today. Thank you, God.
portion, and He is our prize. Drawn to Thee, reaching by the grace in His eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss. My heart burns violently inside of my chest, and I don't have the time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves We are His portion, and He is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in His eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss. My heart turns violently inside of my chest, and I don't have the time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. How He loves us, loves us. How He loves us, loves us. How He loves us. And oh, how He loves us so. Oh, how He loves us. How He loves us so.
You know, I was thinking about ruts that we get ourselves into. And I remember being in Rome and looking on the ground and seeing these ruts that were there from chariots. And that they were still on this road. And I just remember looking and going, wow, those have been here for centuries. And I think about the ruts that we have in our lives, about these embedded theologies, these paradigms of who we believe God to be, and how hard it is to not fall into one of those ruts. A rut is built because the chariot starts to turn a corner, or at that time, and it just falls right into that rut and just keeps going down it. And it's like we hit these moments in our lives, and we want, with everything in us, to go fall into that rut again. But God calls us to something different, a different thought, a different process, a different way that says, what you did on that cross was enough. And that when we're faced with these moments, when everything in us wants to default to think like Job thought, or to think in these old patterns that we all have them, God invites us face to face to go, trust me. Even here, trust me. Even here. And we got to pull out of that rut and start a new rut. And if we keep doing that, this will become our new rut of life. Of a beautiful, powerful pattern that we go, what you did on that cross was enough for this moment that I'm in right now. Amen? Okay, that's not why I wanted everybody to stay. But that's just rolling in me. Anyway, so we have a beautiful opportunity to send 2 amazing young women to Mozambique, Africa, for 14 days. And they're leaving on Thursday, so I'm going to invite